The other day I was thinking about one of my favorite movies as a child, which is The Prince of Egypt. The Prince of Egypt tells the story of the prophet Moses from the religions of Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. The story introduces a world with the pharaohs who rule Egypt. They keep the Hebrews, or the Jews, or the Israelites as slaves and force them to make structures such as the pyramids. At one time, the pharaoh decides that he will murder all boys that are born as Hebrews. Moses, who is a baby boy at the time, is put in a basket and rushed down the river Nile by his mother. She asks her two children, Miriam and Aaron, to follow Moses as he goes down the Nile to make sure that he's safe. Moses is collected from the river by the wife of the pharaoh, who has another son named Ramesses. The pharaoh and his wife decide to raise Moses as their own child, with Moses growing up alongside his brother Ramesses as both princes of Egypt. Moses grows up in a life of luxury and is spoiled, and is also guarded from the cruel world around him by his father, who is the pharaoh, along with his wealth and luxury. As he grows older, at one point Moses runs into his brother and sister, Miriam and Aaron. This triggers his memory of them as a baby, but he refuses to recognize them and refuses to know who they are when they claim that they're his siblings. He later has a nightmare in which he learns the truth about the genocide that the pharaoh had ordered. While his brother Ramesses orders the building of a new temple by the Israelite slaves, and becomes desperate when he sees an old man get flogged by one of the guards. Moses becomes so disturbed by what he sees that he accidentally ends up killing the guard. Moses is stopped by his brother Ramesses, who tells him that one day Ramesses will be the new pharaoh, and because he will be the new god, he gets to decide what does and does not happen, and he says that Moses did not kill anyone, so Moses will not be punished. Moses runs away from his brother Ramesses, telling him that he's not in fact who Ramesses thinks he is. Moses is not a prince of Egypt. Moses then runs through the desert and arrives at an oasis where he defends three young girls from some desert thugs. Moses is welcomed by Jethro, who is the high priest of a tribe of people. There Moses is taught a lesson about looking at your life through the eyes of heaven and not looking at your life through your own eyes. Moses becomes a shepherd and falls in love with Zipporah and marries her. Moses becomes adjusted to his life in the tribe. After this, Moses discovers a burning bush, which is in fact God, and God instructs Moses to return to Egypt and free the Hebrews from the Pharaoh. God puts power in the shepherding staff of Moses and promises him that he will tell him what to say to the Pharaoh. When Moses arrives in Egypt, he is happily greeted by Ramesses, who is now the new Pharaoh with a wife and a son. Moses requests the Pharaoh to release the Hebrews and transforms his staff into a snake to demonstrate the power of God. Hotep and Hui, who work for the pharaoh, deceptively recreate this transformation, only to have their snakes eaten by Moses. In order to protect his empire and feeling betrayed by Moses, Ramesses doubles the work that the Hebrew slaves. The Hebrews blame Moses for the increased workload, which disheartens Moses. However, his sister Miriam inspires Moses to continue his mission. Moses casts the first of the 10 plagues of Egypt by changing the waters of the Nile into blood. But Ramesses is not affected by this. God inflicts 8 more plagues on Egypt, including a plague of frogs, boils, hailfire, but Ramesses becomes more and more stubborn and vows to never release the Hebrews. Disheartened by this, Moses prepares the Hebrews for the 10th plague. He instructs them to sacrifice a lamb and mark their doorsteps with its blood, as the angel of death will pass over those which is marked by blood. That night, the final plague kills all the firstborn children of Egypt, included Ramesses' young son, while sparing those of the Hebrews. Ramesses is destroyed due to the loss of his son, and gives the Hebrews permission to leave. After this, Moses feels remorse. He then leads the Hebrews out of Egypt, but when he arrives at the Red Sea, he discovers that Ramesses is pursuing the Hebrews with his army with an intent to kill them. Moses uses his staff to part the Red Sea, while Ramesses' army chases after the Hebrews. But the sea closes over and drowns the Egyptian soldiers, sparing only Ramesses. Moses bids farewell to his brother and leads the Hebrews to Mount Sinai, where he discovers the 10 Commandments. The movie is a masterpiece both visually, musically, and in every other way. As this is a religious story, there are hundreds of lessons you could take from this. One of my favorite bits in the film is when Moses is in a gathering with Jethro's tribe. Here Moses is very distraught. He's realized that his whole life has been a lie. He grew up thinking that he was the Prince of Egypt, when really he was a Hebrew who had escaped genocide. When Jethro thanks Moses for saving his daughters from the bandits, Moses tells Jethro that he has nothing to be thankful of. He tells Jethro that he's not done anything good in his life. reflecting on his actions as the Prince of Egypt. Jethro then explains to him that Moses cannot look at his life through his own eyes. He has to learn to look at his life through the eyes of heaven. He explains to Moses that a thread in a tapestry could never know its purpose, because it can never see that it forms a part of a great pattern. He asks Moses if the rock that sits on top of a mountain is more important than a rock that forms the base. He asks Moses how he could ever know his true value if he kept looking at his own life through his own eyes. He needs to learn how to look at his life through the eyes of heaven. I think there is a shift of thinking here as to how Moses thought before, which was his life as an individualist, as a young prince of Egypt, where he did whatever pleasured him and had no concerns for anyone else. Jethro is essentially asking Moses to enter adulthood. He needs to start looking at his life from a wider perspective, in that he needs to find out where he fits in and what value he has for others. I felt I could relate to this growing up myself. I think during my younger years I was very individualistic. I had my own dreams and ambitions and failed to see how I needed things like family, community, and the help of others to live a happy and fulfilling life. I thought I could abandon who I was, things like my ethnic background, my religion, my family, my culture, and that this would make me happier. But as Moses discovers that his life of luxury was simply a lie, and that his father the Pharaoh had sheltered him from all the evils of the world that he himself partook in. I think when you're younger, you have a naive view of looking at the world because you've never really had any responsibility or had to do tough things. Once you discover how cold and harsh the world can be, you learn to take your place. And as you take your place and become comfortable, you give yourself the opportunity to have a more truer calling and to fulfill a higher purpose. This could be things like raising a family, helping your parents with things, being someone who helps those in his community, having a spiritual or religious calling, or fulfilling some other higher purpose. When all you care about is maximizing the pleasure in your life, you can never feel fulfilled. What the song Looking Through Heaven's Eyes teaches us is that we have to recognize who we are. A rock which forms the base of the mountain can't say that it wants to be the rock at the top of the mountain. That's not its function. When we learn what our function is in society, we can have a much more peaceful life and strive towards a goal every day that we can actually fulfill. You discover it when you have an honest conversation with yourself about who you are, what you've been pretending to be, and where you know in your heart the truth lies. Once you start that journey, you can come closer to discovering whether what you thought was reality was actually true or not.